Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever.
Others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie Oubliette.
Childhood nostalgia! Hello, listeners. Welcome to Movie Oubliette, episode 147, the Continental Traversing podcast, with me, Dan, procrastinating packing all my crap into boxes in Melbourne, Australia.
And me, Conrad, dreading the clock change in Cambridge, UK.
In this podcast, we discuss lesser talked about genre films, sci-fi, horror, and fantasy because we all grew up with creepy siblings being possessed by spirits from another realm. Didn't we, Conrad?
I don't know. My brother seemed fairly normal, but there we go.
Hello, Conrad. How are you?
I'm very well, but I'm dreading the fact that this Easter weekend when we are recording is when in the UK they put the clocks forward. And I hate it.
Right.
I hate it with a passion.
Yeah, it's happening for us next weekend, actually. So we put the clocks back because we're heading into winter.
Of course, yeah. So spring forward, fall back, I think is the way that we remember it in our hemisphere.
Yeah, it always makes the time zone changes a bit awkward. So I think at the moment it's a big sort of difference, and then we're going to get a smaller difference between you and me.
Yeah. So you've got the fun of packing up everything that you own.
Yes. So we have bought our first house. This is
Congrats.
New news. Just putting everything in boxes. I haven't done it yet. I'm thinking about it every day.
Yeah.
But we have,
well, that counts.
I think in a month we will be moving into our new house. So yeah, it's exciting times. This will be our dwelling for the next, 30 years or however much longer I'm alive. But yeah, it's going to be a completely new space. I can properly set up my studio. Even more so than it is now. And
because it'll be your place to do with as you wish.
Exactly. So exciting times, nice change as well, different area of Melbourne. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be good.
Will you have a guest room is my question.
Yes, we will have a guest room. Yes, yeah. All right. Well, Conrad, have our listeners been talking to us? What's in the mailbag today?
They have, and for several films that we've covered recently. So we heard from Stephen on Jabberwocky, and he said, this was one of the first VHS videos that I bought along with The Last Starfighter. I think the range was $9.99. I remember it well.
Oh, wow.
I remember being absolutely horrified at the gore, icked out at the grime, and being left with a general feeling of flatness and disappointment.
Yeah.
However, I've revisited it after listening to the pod, and I have to say that I liked it much more. So much so that I may go and visit the castle in Pembrokeshire in May. Great show, guys.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. So there you go. We're affecting the tourism industry in the UK now, Dan.
Yes. Everyone go to Wales right now.
Yeah, just rolled around in a muddy field. We also heard from Well Then Let's See on Dune, who said, the Vaseline budget must have been huge to get the Harkonnens looking that sweaty glossy.
Yeah.
Probably purchased industrial-sized tubs.
Yeah, they were just constantly glistening, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. They were absolutely disgusting. Not something that Villeneuve did in his version.
Stellan Skarsgård does roll around in a murky bath quite a lot, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's
similar.
true. Yeah. And finally, we heard from Chazilla on The Abominable Snowman, who said, yes, us card-carrying NRA Americans found the part where the Yeti went straight to the firearms, the most terrifying part of the film. That's why the rifles should be inside the sleeping bag.
Of course. The safest place.
Yeah, wouldn't you shoot off your toes, possibly?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Anyway, please do keep writing. We love to hear from you.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the episode today. What are we doing, Conrad?
Well, let me just shamble on over to the Oubliette and find out. I'm in an abandoned church.
Oh, okay. In the woods.
Spooky. Okay, there's a coffin here. Oh, looks like there's a blindfolded girl in it.
Ghostly.
Oh, no, she's gone.
Oh.
There's a Blu-ray of a film in there. I'll just reach in and... There's a raven.
Wow.
And now a cat. Too much. I'm coming back.
Oh, my God.
Maybe there's a ghost.
Feral animals.
I know.
What do you have, Conrad?
So I have a copy with me of the 1980, although there's a story behind that, American supernatural horror film, The Watcher in the Woods.
Ooh.
Yeah, directed by John Hough, or Hough I think it's pronounced, an uncredited Vincent McEverty, based on a screenplay by Brian Clemens and Harry Spalding and Rosemary Ann Sisson, based on a novel by Florence Engel Randall, and starring Bette Davis, Carol Baker, David McCallum, Lynn Holly Johnson, and Kyle Richards.
Ooh, so what happens in this movie?
Well, the perfect American white blonde middle-class couple, writer Helen and composer Paul, decide to rent the creepiest manor in an unspecified but definitely rural part of ye olde England for themselves and their two daughters, Jan and Ellie, despite some obvious red flags.
Yes.
1, their next-door neighbour and landlady is a spooky grimace on legs, played by Bette Davis. 2, the teenaged boy living on a nearby farm is a total smoke show. And 3, every time they so much as approach or look at the house, the camera starts prowling through the woods, spinning or crash zooming into their faces. Ellie starts to hear voices and write backwards. Jan is plagued by visions of a blindfolded girl in white desperately calling for help, and both girls become convinced there's a presence watching them from the surrounding woods. As Jan carefully investigates by screeching breathlessly at every person she meets, she discovers that all of the locals have been traumatized by a secret tragedy that caused the mysterious disappearance of Bette Davis's daughter Karen several decades before. Who or what is the Watcher in the Woods? Is Karen a ghost haunting the 3 people who hazed her in an abandoned church? Or is she trapped in an alternate dimension after an unplanned foreign exchange swap with an unsuspecting alien? And will Ellie ever stop being hungry? Find out after the break.
Yes, we will.
And we're back to talk about The Watcher in the Woods. This is another childhood special for me, Dan.
Oh, is this childhood nostalgia then?
I think it is.
Childhood nostalgia.
But you'd never seen this before, is that right?
I had never seen this. I'd heard about it through you only. I'd never really heard about it apart from that. I have been wanting to watch it because I've heard you talk about it being a Disney dark period movie where they tried to sort of venture out into more mature content. But yeah, no, I'd never seen it before. I was surprised by it. But what's your history with this movie?
So I probably caught it on television. I never owned it on VHS. I think I saw it on TV, recorded it, and it was kind of gateway horror for me as a kid.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I think that's what Disney was going for. So the head of the studio at the time, Ron Miller, realized that the old family-friendly movies was sort of aging out. You know, people were not interested in those in the rough and tumble 80s.
Sure.
So he was sort of trying to push them into PG territory. And the first attempt at that was The Black Hole in the late 70s in response to Star Wars. Bit of a disaster. And then this was the second attempt, which they thought was going to be their Exorcist. Child-friendly, gateway horror. It's a little bit scary, but actually when you examine it quite closely, there's really no peril for anybody involved. Nobody's actually got bad intentions at all. It's all fine.
I mean, I do find that that's the case pretty much with all kind of haunted house spooky movies. Like generally no one dies or very few people get killed. And it's just a bunch of just scary stuff that happens. No one's in any real peril. It's much more of a murder mystery most of the time as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like a slasher where it's like body counts are like piling up. It's not like that. It's more about the tension building and the atmosphere. I actually did find this movie kind of scary.
Yeah.
Like if I'd seen this movie as a kid, I would have been petrified. I wouldn't have been able to sleep for weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's kind of brave that Disney kind of released this.
It was, yeah, but I mean, it had a troubled history, infamously so, if you're a Watcher in the Woods fan.
Right.
Originally, it was going to be released in 1980, and it was screened at New York and LA in one cut of the film that wasn't quite finished.
Right.
Because they were desperately trying to get it out in time for Bette Davis's 50th anniversary in Hollywood.
Right.
So they rushed it out a few weeks before it was ready, and they hadn't finished the special effects for a key sequence at the end that sort of explained what the Watcher was, where it was from, where Karen was, what had happened. It visualized all of it, but it was really rough and ready. And they actually, because it wasn't ready, they took most of it out. It was going like gangbusters, apparently, in this preview, right up until the point when the Watcher was shown on screen.
Right.
And then people started laughing, and then they got confused.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing kind of fell apart.
Okay.
So Disney freaked out. Ron Miller pulled the film. They got Vincent McEvity, who is a Disney regular, a director that they trusted,
Right.
to do reshoots
Okay.
for the ending to give it a slightly different, simpler ending. And then they put it out in theatres in 1981 in October, so spooky season.
Okay.
And it didn't do particularly well. So there are varying reports as to its budget. Starburst at the time said it was 7 million. The American Film Institute records it as 9. It gleaned about 5 million in the box office in 1981, so it was a bust at a time when Superman 2 was riding high that year, Raiders of the Lost Ark, On Golden Pond, Arthur, and Stripes. Those were the
Okay.
top 5 movies. So yeah, so it bombed.
Right.
And then I think Disney was a bit embarrassed about it because it wasn't released on home media
Really?
very much until Anchor Bay, an independent DVD producer, was given permission to release some of these movies. So they did The Black Hole and they did Watcher in the Woods and they did a few others on DVD.
Right.
And started to show some of these alternate scenes and so on for people who'd always wanted to see them. But even that was a fraught process, and they ended up fighting with Disney a lot because they were trying to hide all of the troubled production aspects of this, I think. A bit embarrassed.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite surprised that it came out in 1980. I mean, they were supposed to release it in 1980 because it is, on the dot of the start of the 80s. Because it doesn't feel like the 80s.
Right, no.
In this movie at all. It doesn't even really feel like the 70s, to be honest. Like, it almost feels like the 60s. Or if you put it in black and white, I would have believed it was the 50s.
Wow, okay.
Like, it just doesn't look modern at all. Like, I would have been quite surprised if I'd seen this in 1980 because it just doesn't feel like an 80s movie.
Yeah.
It has a kind of an old approach to it. It almost feels like a gothic horror, like a 60s gothic horror
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like it doesn't have a modern look or feel to it. Even the way that people talk. Like I don't understand how, where are they? They're in England, right?
Yes.
But the family's American.
Yes.
But they don't really explain that. And I was just confused because all the locals are very British, like very, very British.
Yeah.
And then they've got this family that's kind of American, but sometimes sounds like mid-Atlantic almost.
Yeah.
It's odd. I was a bit confused.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, so Carol Baker and David McCallum, I think, have been working in the UK quite a lot. And the reason they were cast in the movie was because they were here anyway.
Right.
It's sort of like Hellraiser. It's sort of plopped right in the middle of the Atlantic because they can't quite figure out what they're trying to do. But they want the American audience.
Yeah.
So you've got Americans visiting ye old England, and it's in the middle of nowhere. They're out in the countryside, and all that seems to be nearby is a fairground, an abandoned church, a farm with a hot guy on it, and Bette Davis just scowling constantly in a cottage, and this old dark house that they film in. So yeah, it could, you're right, it could be any time, and it's very classily shot for the most part by John Hough, who is a British director, who we know from last year from Legend of Hell House.
Yes.
Which we looked at with Chris McKay. We'd never seen that before. And there are parallels between the two.
There are,
for sure.
Yeah. I did feel like that. Like the ending felt very kind of similar. And just the use of wind.
Yes.
I mean, it's the same setting as well. You've got this haunted house, really, that they move into, this mansion that's far too big for a family of 4 to possibly live in. So, yeah, the setting feels very similar to The Legend of Hell House.
But some of the camera work, I think, in this is much more late 70s, early 80s, in the sense that there's a lot of spinning, there's a lot of crash zooming, sort of like...
Yes.
I always complain about Kubrick doing it in The Shining in 1980, crash zooming into people's faces, which I'm not a fan of. And yes, a lot of wind machines... It's literally smoke and mirrors. It really is quite old-fashioned.
It is. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't feel like a modern film. It felt very gothic. Like I kind of wanted more of that in like The Haunting, and I really did enjoy The Legend of Hell House. And seeing this, it was like, oh yeah, there's more of this stuff that I kind of wished to see in classic gothic horror. For me, it was kind of a surprise to see that.
Yeah. Lynn Holly Johnson, playing Jan, is our protagonist, our central character. She was a figure skater, not an actor. I only know her for 2 films, this and For Your Eyes Only, where she plays a skater who's a bit of a brat who comes on to Roger Moore and ends up in his bed at one point, but he actually sends her away because she's like a third of his age and really annoying.
Okay.
So there's her, and then there's Carl Richards, who horror fans will know from Halloween, where she played Lindsay, the girl that was being babysat.
Right.
And she's appeared in some of the recent trilogy as well. And she was a Disney favourite at the time. She appeared in the films that John Hough directed, Escape to Witch Mountain and Return to Witch Mountain. It's about supernatural kids, I think. I haven't seen them.
I think I've seen the first one, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So the point I was going to make is that the overarching story, like you said, it is a detective story, and crucially, it's like a Nancy Drew mystery because the film is really centered on 3 generations of women. The men are completely incidental to this movie. This movie passes the Bechdel test in about 3 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like a Nancy Drew sort of murder mystery. And I did find it similar to movies where something horrific happens in their childhood and then they have to deal with it as adults. So like It, or even like Dreamcatcher kind of. Another movie, Prom Night, is kind of similar, where like someone gets killed or something, and then they have to deal with the guilt of it later on when the killer comes back, or I can't remember. But it's kind of a similar setup.
Yeah.
Which I don't know whether I'd seen much. Like, I feel like this is one of the earlier movies where you've got a haunting what seems like a haunting, where it's more of a murder mystery. Like we have to find out what's going on, or like how they died, or how they're trapped, how to get them back, how to get Karen. Whereas previously in these kind of spooky haunting movies, it's either just trying to vanquish the haunting, just trying to get rid of the ghosts. That's what they were trying to do in, like, you know, all of those 60s and 70s haunting movies. Whereas this is more like, we'll get rid of the ghost by figuring out how either they died, or with this one where it's not a ghost and it's a girl that's trapped in another dimension, which is again a big twist that I did not expect in this movie.
No.
And then, yeah, figuring that out.
No, that's right. I mean, ghosts are people too, and they just need to be understood. We need to find out why they're upset, and then it'll be fine.
Because that became quite sort of a cliche almost in like the 90s and 2000s with movies like The Others and The Sixth Sense and What Lies Beneath. I think The Orphanage, The Changeling. They're kind of all kind of murder mysteries, really.
They are. And then a film that I saw recently, again in 4K, because it was just released, is The Ring, or Ringu, the original.
Ah, yes.
The Japanese one, which then does a twist on that, which is like, yes, you found out what happened to Sadako, but she doesn't give a shit about that. She just wants to kill people. She's evil. That's the twist at the end of that one. So it's okay, we're going back full circle now.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's interesting how this genre has developed over the years.
Yes. So in that respect, I think it's quite complex in this movie, where it's not just an evil spirit that they're trying to get rid of.
No. Although it looks like it could be, because there's a lot of prowling POV shots. There's a lot of cello stabbing and sort of Jaws-like hunting, stalking music. So you really do get the sense that there could be a threat here. And there are instances where Lynn Holly Johnson's Jan is almost drowned. She's almost hit by a stray motorbike that explodes.
Yeah.
Runaway horses at one point. You know, there's a lot that appears to be threatening.
Yes.
But then it all turns out to be fine.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was a bit confused with the spirit. What are you trying to say here? Are you trying to hurt Jan, or just prove you exist? Because in all those instances, it was like Jan didn't get hit by the motorbike because she whispered into Ellie's ear to get Jan to come to her. And that, I guess, proves that she's an entity that is, you know, trying to communicate with Jan.
Yeah.
But yeah, in a very, like, there are better ways to do that, right?
Yeah, rather than freaking everyone out. I mean, it's like the horse sequence. The Watcher startles the horses and then startles the driver of the van that's going to hit the runaway horse to prevent an accident that could have killed Ellie. And you just think, well, why not startle the horse? You could just do that, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that scene, the point of that scene was to lure Jan to the chapel, because she ends up at the chapel on the runaway horse.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, there's a lot of sequence of events, like, I don't know how the spirit knew to do that, to make that happen. But okay, that's fine. It's another entity from another dimension. That's fine. Also, do they ever call it the Watcher in the movie?
No, they don't.
I mean, that kind of negates the title of the movie then. Like, you never find out what the Watcher is, because they never name the Watcher. They never name the spirit as the Watcher. I mean, for the most part in the movie, you think the spirit is Karen.
Yes.
You think she is trying to communicate with Jan, and then you find out, hang on, no, she's trapped in the other dimension, and it's this other thing that's trapped in our dimension because they accidentally swapped during the seance ritual for some reason, during an eclipse. And the entity is stuck in our dimension and wants to go back. And then the ending, for me, felt very confusing.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have been a swap, like the Watcher goes there, Karen comes back. Why does Jan go away and then she comes back with Karen and the Watcher's? It's like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Shouldn't it just be one-to-one swap.
Yeah, it should be, really. Why is Jan in the middle of
Yeah,
this?
I don't know.
I've no idea.
There are two alternative endings, right?
Yeah.
They do explain it more, but they also make it more confusing.
Yes.
Like, the more they explain, the more I'm confused. Although it does explain a few things that I just queried about. Like, I think they needed Jan because she's the image of Karen. Because Karen is stuck in some frozen dimension where she's an inverted image, and they need Jan's image to rescue.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
doesn't
know.
make any
I mean,
sense at
the
all.
more you think about it, the more it doesn't really make sense. But that's the explanation, I guess.
Yeah. The theatrical version of the movie has them recreating the seance with the adult versions of the three kids who did the hazing ritual on Karen years before.
Yes.
Or some sort of initiation ceremony into their secret club or whatever that
Yes.
met in the church.
Yes,
Fine.
yes.
And so they recreate the seance with Jan in the middle, and then weird, spooky thing, light show comes in. Mm-hmm. It goes into the middle.
There's just like a whole bunch of lights.
Yeah.
Optical effects going on. Jan looks like she's getting like sucked into the void, but then it just cuts to black, and then you see Karen there. She's appeared on the podium, and then it cuts to like Jan on the floor
Yes.
with Mike, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons they changed the ending was they wanted Mike to rescue Jan to stop her from being
Right.
swapped over to the other dimension, because they wanted the male to be active.
Oh, come on.
Who cares?
He didn't need to be there, to be honest.
Not really. He was just there to be hot and take her to a fairground. That's all he was there for.
Yeah. I mean, the alternate ending, the first one I watched, it's very different.
Yes. So a monster appears in the chapel,
Yes.
laser blasts Mike across the room.
A horrific monster, I might add. Like, it looks like the Grim Reaper on like acid. Like, he's just horrifying.
Yeah.
He's like an alien skeletal being with like black streamers coming off it with wings
Yes.
that envelops Jan. It's truly terrifying. I'm not surprised they took that out. I mean, kids would have been just traumatized by that.
Yeah, I think so.
You don't see it until the very end.
No.
And it's just like, where did this come from?
And it looks like the Skeksis in the Dark Crystal. It's a big
Yes.
puppeted thing. The director complains that the shots of it are too long.
Yeah, they kind of are.
Yeah, they kind of are. So if it were shorter and you just saw glimpses of it, it would be even freakier. And you think, well, yeah, but then it would really traumatize children.
Yeah.
But in that version, at least, Carol Baker, the mum, Jan's mum, is participating in the ending of the movie and is sort of freaking out and panicking. And then there's a blinding light and Jan and Karen come back. And then there's a tearful reunion on the lawn with Bette Davis, who luckily has completely redone her hair on that day.
Right.
I don't know why. Got tarted up for the eclipse. Don't know.
Yeah.
And then Jan talks to Ellie about dimensions and negative images as they walk across the lawn, and it makes no sense whatsoever.
Not
and then
a
in
lot.
alternate ending 2, there is a longer version of 1, but with
Far too much explanation. Yeah.
you get to see where Jan and the monster go, which is like, I don't know, like a Yes album cover, Trip on Acid or
it's-
something. I don't know what the hell's
It's just,
going on.
yeah. It's one of those moments where you think less is more. I think less is more. Just let us use our imagination about where they go to. We don't need to see that.
Yeah.
Because seeing it, far more confusing.
Yes.
Like, you've just switched genres completely. It was first this kind of supernatural spooky movie, and you go to another planet.
Yeah.
I'm fine with other dimensions. You know, I can just imagine, a spirit realm, that's fine. You know, poltergeist, you've got this other dimension, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't need to see an alien planet. That's just too far. It's too much to try to consume. It's and right at the end as well. It's jumping the shark there.
It is, yeah. There's a UFO on a landscape with a river of energy, and I don't know what's going on.
No.
There are hints towards some other bits in there, though. So the alternative ending, too, they show a longer version of the scene where Bette Davis confronts Jan as she's going to the church and tells her the Watcher is an angry, evil spirit that will, quote, never leave Jan and Ellie alone.
Yeah.
All of that is cut in the finished version of the film.
I'm kind of glad it is. Like, there's a lot of more extended explanation, and the scenes that are in the theatrical cut are much longer with lots of more exposition and much more explanation. But I feel like you don't need it. You really don't need it. Like, I don't need to know why this person is over here, and we just don't need to see that. I'm glad they cut that out.
Yeah.
I do feel like the first alternate ending with the creature, that's terrifying, which I kind of like. But also how Jan disappears for quite a while. Like, they actually think she's gone, and her mum arrives, and it's quite emotional. It's actually a really powerful scene. And when she returns with Karen, and Karen hasn't aged at all. So in the theatrical version, she has aged, and she's now 30 or whatever. Whereas in the alternate ending, she's still a little kid. So that's kind of interesting. And so when you have the reunion with young Karen and like her mother, Mrs. Elwood, it's quite a moving moment. It's actually a really, really emotional reunion, and I quite like that.
Yeah. And also having Jan and Ellie's mum there just ties it all together as being really a story about 3 generations of women.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense, the original ending. They just needed to be given time to finish it.
Yeah.
And they weren't allowed to. So you end up with this weird, hasty thing that doesn't quite make sense.
So was that the alternate ending? Was that the ending that was shown to that test screening?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm confused why there was laughter.
I don't get it either.
I don't think it's laughable. I don't think it's a huge jump from what you've seen throughout the movie with like spooky things and images and mirrors to a full-blown laser shooting monster. It is quite a jump, but I don't know. I kind of liked it. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
If they'd finished that, maybe if they'd like added some optical stuff to the monster to make it look less puppety, maybe it could have been quite cool.
Yeah. The film is really creepy, I think.
It is.
I think it's very effective at establishing a creepy atmosphere.
It is, although I was confused by it. So you from the very beginning, you have all these kind of point of view shots of something watching them, something hiding in the woods, something kind of peering behind trees and stuff. Like, you see the point of view, and for a long time you think, oh, it's just the guy. So it's Tom Colley, one of the kids that has grown up. You think it's him because he turns up at the church with Jan. But then you find out it's not him. It's confusing because I didn't even know what I was looking at. Like, who's the point of view from now? Because Karen's in the other universe, so it can't be her, right? So
Yeah.
I was a bit confused. And they never say Watcher in the movie,
Right.
in any of the dialogue. It's only in that alternate ending that they say explicitly say the Watcher, whereas they don't mention the Watcher at all.
No, Mrs. Elwood says, I feel that there's something there. I know there is something out there in the woods.
Yeah.
But it's not clear that there's 2 entities at work.
Yeah, because for the most part, you think Karen is possessing Ellie as well. So Ellie starts being possessed and saying creepy stuff and writing things on windows. And you think it's Karen. You don't think it's this Watcher.
No.
So it is I thought it was a bit confusing. Like, what are you trying to say here?
Yeah. I think for the most part, across the movie, you're supposed to think that there is a thing haunting them and it is Karen.
Right.
But then you have the shock surprise that no, it's not. It's actually the thing that's here instead of Karen.
Right,
And
right.
we can get her back.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's intentionally confusing and sort of uncanny because you can't figure out what's going on. And I think that sort of added as a child to the, I don't know what's going on here. It's creepy.
Yeah. I agree. It was very creepy. And there was a lot of dark material that you just would not see in a Disney film. So you mentioned the drowning scene, the ghostly images of Karen That's really terrifying. Like, first you see her in the mirrors as this blindfolded girl just calling out for help. The fun fair scene, the sort of carnival where she goes into the room of mirrors and you see like hundreds of Karens blindfolded, black and white. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
That is blood-curdlingly scary.
Yeah.
And the image of her in the coffin, that sort of ghostly, like, whew, that really did give me a fright. Like, I was not expecting that. And even just seeing blood, like one of the windows cracks in this triangle shape that Jan is sort of touching and her finger bleeds. Like, even seeing like a drop of blood was like, whoa.
In Disney.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. They were fighting on the set, though, because even though Ron Miller, the head of the studio, wanted to do this, make this move into PG and more adult, stuff for older children and families to watch, he didn't quite have the courage to see it through because they were fighting on the set all the time. So the scene where Jan is screeching her head off at her mother, and we will talk about Lynn Holly Johnson's performance.
Yeah.
But there is a scene where her mother grabs her by the shoulders and shakes her to try and calm her down or say that she's being silly or whatever.
Yeah.
Originally, she slapped her one.
Oh.
But the head of the studio, who was on set throughout, was like, no, you cannot slap a child in a Disney movie. You've got to reshoot that. So they had to shoot it again. And, as I say, with the alternate ending where you have Bette Davis's character, Mrs. Elwood, saying, the thing is evil and it will never leave you alone.
Yeah.
All of that stuff, they had to dial all of it back because they were worried that they were pushing too far. And, it's funny thinking of Disney, the powerhouse that it is now, but that was mainly through diversification. So they ended up launching a different brand, Touchstone Pictures.
Right.
And then they can start doing things like Ruthless People and Arachnophobia and all these movies that are Disney products.
Yeah.
But they are under a different label, sort of like a sub-brand that they can slightly distance themselves from without tarnishing their own brand.
Yeah, I mean, the Disney brand it's pretty strong.
Yeah.
And even now, with them owning Marvel, their takeover feels like these are Disney Marvel movies now. They don't feel like the original Phase 1 Marvel movies.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing. It's like they've got Fox. So on their Disney Plus product, they've got Alien and Predator and things like this, but they don't have a horror category. If you look, there is no horror category on the Disney Plus service. There's a thriller category, and that's where you'll find Barbarian, for fuck's sake.
Oh, right.
I mean, that is not a thriller.
Yeah.
It's a horror movie.
Yeah.
But they can't quite bring themselves to do it even now.
Yeah.
All these properties are just sort of jammed into this conglomerate that they're not quite comfortable with.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, talking about Disney isms in this movie, there's a lot of optical effects that just look very Disney.
Yeah, they do, don't they? It's a bit Mary Poppins, isn't it? Magical.
Yeah. So, like, they've got flashes in the woods that are just, like, drawn on optical effects rather than flashing a spotlight or something, like an actual practical effect. Like, even the window crack. There's like a flash of the crack, and it's just like another drawn on Disney, almost like Fantasia looking effect.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of odd to see.
Yeah, it is. It's traditional cell animation superimposed on film. So yeah, it does. It feels very the Disney approach to special effects. It's fun, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, it's fun, but it feels family friendly, I guess.
Yeah, it's like magic. Like you say, like Fantasia.
Yeah.
It feels like it's magical rather than a tangible, real, threatening, dangerous thing.
Yeah. I did have one question about the drowning scene. What was the point in that? Like, why did the entity almost accidentally drown Jan?
I do not know. I have no idea. to meet Mrs. Aylward. I don't know.
Yeah.
You could arrange a better meet cute than her prodding her with a stick to get her out from underneath some branches in a pond.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that image of Bette Davis, she's just got resting scowl face, jabbing at Jan
Yeah.
with a stick as though she's pushing her further down. And you've got shots of Lynn Holly Johnson. It looks like she's like under glass in water.
Yeah. It's quite eerie. Yeah.
It's really spooky.
It's quite strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's quite terrifying imagery in this movie that I did not expect.
Yeah.
But yeah, very gothic horror as well. Some of the things that the entity causes, the sequence of events, it feels like Final Destination crossed with like The Omen. You know, this thing like making these almost deaths happen. You've got the motorbike crash and then the horses scaring the truck driver that tips over. And when they try to leave, when Jan and her mum and Ellie try to leave in the car and they drive over the bridge and the car won't start and then they get out and lightning strikes the bridge and it bursts into flames and the car plummets down. Like, wow, this is like terrifying stuff.
It's really strong, even though it's a Disney movie and even though they were desperately clawing it back to control it. So you can understand why it made a massive impression on me as a kid.
Yeah, I really can. And going back to the sort of gothic horror, I did find it similar to Burnt Offerings, again with Bette Davis.
Yeah,
in
Bette
that
Davis
one.
is there.
Different type of character. But
Yeah.
like that really kind of spooky atmosphere throughout.
Yeah, definitely. Well, having Bette Davis there will always do that.
Yes.
I love all of her line deliveries. They're all so odd, aren't they? Everything is very staccato and croaky and forceful monotone. It's a sort of, are you sensitive? Do you sense things? So, Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
Calm down, lady.
There are a bunch of cliches that this movie does really lean into that we can get into in the movie awards. But there's a lot of cliches.
Now it's time for random trivia.
Okay, Conrad, what piece of trivia will you reveal to us from a cracked mirror today?
My trivia is that parts of the film were shot in Ettington Park in Warwickshire, which was the house used for The Haunting by Robert Wise.
Oh, right.
In 1963, they used it for John Keller's house when Jan goes to visit him.
Yes, I can see that.
But they also used the ruins of the Holy Trinity Church, which are on the grounds of the house, for the exterior shots of
the chapel.
the chapel. Yeah.
Interesting.
All that remains of this 12th century medieval church is the tower and the walls of the nave and the south transept, which were restored as a mortuary chapel in 1823, and it's now treated pretty much as a picturesque garden feature, a ruined church embedded amongst lush trees. So all the more reason, thinking about promoting British tourism, to go and visit Ettington Park in Warwickshire, because you'll get The Haunting, and if you wander around the grounds and have a look at the church too, you'll also get The Watcher in the Woods as a bonus.
Yes. Oh,
I think there should be a walking tour of movie Oubliette locations in the UK. And that's our trivia.
yes. Actually, talking about the characters, so you've got the mum and dad, and at first I was like, oh, wow, that's an interesting job. So the dad's a pianist / opera composer, and you never see any of it. I thought, oh, yeah, we're going to get some music, we're going to get some writing. He plays jazz on a piano at one point, and then he like flicks through some manuscripts of music in the car, because that's what you do as a composer.
Apparently.
Just like, I don't know.
And you never see him again.
Yeah, exactly. And the mum is a children's book writer.
Yeah.
Which it does seem like a popular job choice for mums in movies.
And in horror movies particularly, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love the scene where the lady who's the real estate agent,
Yes.
who's showing them the property, when he plays jazz on the piano, she says, "When you you said opera, I thought he was a serious musician.
I know.
She's like scandalized by light jazz.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I love it.
awful.
And it's David McCallum as well, who I knew as a kid from the Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV show. I know him as
right. Okay.
Ilya Kuryakin. So I was really excited to see more of him in this movie. And he's got like 2 scenes and he's gone.
Yeah, I
Just
know.
really,
I know.
Really sad.
But it goes back to your point of like, it's about the woman and
It
the
is,
female
yeah.
characters in this movie. The men, don't worry about it.
But our central woman, Lynn Holly Johnson, young lady, Jan, her performance is kind of on one note throughout the whole movie, and it's shrieking at the top of her voice.
Yeah.
And I find it quite tiresome. I wish there'd just been a little bit of subtlety, a bit of attenuation.
Yeah.
But she is just pitched at full panic throughout the entire movie.
Pretty frantic.
Meeting these British people suffering from a childhood trauma. And she just says,
Yeah.
You gotta tell me what happened to Karen. Crikey, just sort of ease into it or something.
Yeah.
Ask them about their day first. But
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
She's full on.
Yeah, I know she is full on. And she's just so middly. Like she's really getting into these people's lives. Like really inserting herself. Like they are PTSD affected adults. You've got one guy living in squalor pretty much with like taxidermy rats hanging from the ceiling and you got another guy just like a recluse with like a ferocious guard dog. Leave these people alone. And she's just like, we have to do the ritual again, you have to relive your trauma, come to the church. Yes, let's do that.
Yeah, just screeching at Mr. Keller, who's the guy with the guard dog. Did the guilt ever go away? It's good grief.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Again, it does feel like old cinema. This is kind of like almost like stage show acting. Like it hasn't got this sort of subtlety and nuance of like film. It's more like dramatic and theatrical, like a stage show. And that's why it doesn't feel like a modern movie.
No, you're right. I guess as a kid, I didn't really care about it. I was just sucked into the spookiness, the mystery.
Yes. What did you think about the Ellie character? This girl that is just constantly possessed and doing really creepy stuff.
Well, Ellie exists in 2 states. She's either possessed or hungry.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 things that she expresses at all through the entire movie, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Kyle Richards is a talented child actor, which is why she was in so many things around this time. I think she does pretty well as spooky, possessed person, especially in the theatrical ending where she has to sort of march down the aisle and explain the whole plot.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's one of the differences as well.
Yeah.
So instead of the monster entity appearing, you've got Ellie possessed by the spirit appearing and being, very scary.
I always remember that scene just before that where she's running through the woods trying to find her dog, Neric. She's named the dog Karen backwards without realizing
Yeah,
it.
I mean, that we could see that twist a mile away, especially when you've written Karen backwards with backwards letters on the window. Of course, we're going to read it the other way around. So the big reveal was like, yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
Like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, we can see that, yeah. But yeah, so she's running through the woods trying to find her dog, and then the wind machine that represents the Watcher finally catches up with her, and she just stares directly into the camera, and instead of sort of shouting, Neric, Neric, she just suddenly goes, Neric. And as a kid, that used to freak the hell out of me.
Oh,
It's like,
right. Yeah.
She's been possessed.
Yeah, I mean, again, a bit cliche. Like, I feel like, we've kind of seen it in The Shining. I mean, which came out the same year, right?
Yeah,
1980?
1980 on the dot.
Yeah, or like maybe The Omen as well.
Yeah, that was more 70s, I think, The Omen. But yeah, very similar.
Yeah, kind of that sort of creepy, possessed kid there's something wrong with that kid.
Yeah, adults were very frightened of their kids in the 80s.
Yeah. What did you think about the movie sonically? I mean, I'm talking about score, but also sound, I did find it was quite a silent, quiet movie. There was lots of moments and scenes where there was no score at all.
Yeah.
And it was almost quieter than it should have been, which was really unnerving.
It was, yeah, which was another thing that freaked me out as a kid because you weren't being told what to feel a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of the score, you get that really from the opening title where, okay, you've got a music box. It's a horror movie about a disappearing kid.
Yeah.
There's a music box.
Sure.
But also you've got just the occasional little spooky flavors from different parts of the orchestra. A bit of cello here, a bit of woodwind here. But it's just little phrases. It's not much. It's just sort of slightly eerie.
Yeah.
Rather than really going for it.
Yeah, I mean, it did sound a little Disney to me. Like it was almost like, oh, this sounds like Bambi, but if Bambi was a horror movie. like there was a lot of woodwind, there was a lot of textural instruments. There was a lot of percussion. It's like a vibraphone or some sort of mallet instrument at one point. Lots of flute and oboe and bassoon. It was really texturally interesting score-wise, and it kind of unnerved in not your cliche way of like, here's strings again. Like they create tension with different instruments. So it was a different color palette, I guess, or sonic palette.
Yeah, and there's some experimental synth stuff going on in there as well. I don't know if you...
Is there?
Yeah, I mean, particularly noticed it because I listened to it with a 5.1 Dolby track on the Anchor Bay disc, and yeah, there's synthesized heartbeat sound effects going on during some of the possession scenes that sound really good if you've got a nice subwoofer.
Right.
So it's quite experimental and, yeah, as you say, not leaning on the strings all the time for that stuff.
Yeah,
which is good.
yeah. I mean, we have to mention his name, obviously. So the music was by Stanley Myers.
Yes.
Who has done Paper House.
Yeah, with Hans Zimmer. I think he had Hans Zimmer like a protege, or they worked together for a while.
Wow.
Early on in his career. So you'll find a lot of Stanley Myers, Hans Zimmer crossovers around about this time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to the whole sort of murder mystery aspect of the movie, I did like the little clues. So you've got the triangle shape that keeps appearing. So the crack in the window is in the triangle, and then there's a reflection on the coffin, which is in the triangle, and the crack on the mirror is in the triangle. You've got the images of Karen being blindfolded, so that's another clue of why was she blindfolded. You've got the glass in the chapel shattering, and you've got the two circles of glass sort of representing the eclipse. I really did love all of those subtle clues. It did remind me of reading like Famous Five or Enid Blyton books, you know, like, oh, what does that mean? You know,
I know,
it's a clue.
It is very sort of a Nancy Drew mystery by way of Sesame Street. You know, today's shape is triangle.
Yeah.
No, I loved all of that stuff as a kid. I thought it was great.
And at one point, Ellie writes on the mirror, "Do it again tomorrow" or something with soap, and then you don't know what that means, but then like later on you realize that it's to do with the eclipse, and the ritual has to happen again on the eclipse, and it was great stuff. I enjoyed it. Do you know how the book ends? Because this movie is based on a book. Is it completely different?
From what I read, the book ends inconclusively with Jan and Ellie going into the woods with some sort of determination to do something.
Right.
And then it stops.
Oh.
So it copped out of dealing with the ending by just not doing one.
Wow.
Which is, really disappointing.
Incredibly unsatisfying.
Yeah.
All right. So they pretty much had free reign, really.
Yeah.
They had to have an ending. You can't just not have an ending.
No.
So the ending with the creature appearing, that is the intended ending for John Hough?
Yeah. And I think properly edited, I think that probably would have been the right one, especially bringing back the mother. And also it doesn't have the theatrical version's dangling plot thread where Ellie goes looking for the runaway dog. And then you're left wondering, is the dog okay?
Yeah, right.
Because it never comes back. So that worried me as a kid. Where's the dog?
Right, yeah. Okay.
Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Moobly Awards.
Yes, it's that special time of the podcast, the Moobly Awards, where we nominate our favourite symbolically triangle or circle-shaped parts of the film in a number of ghostly mirror-revealing categories.
That quote.
My favourite quote comes from Ilya Kuryakin, David McCallum himself, and it's when Ellie says, when they're looking around the house, maybe there's a ghost. And he says, what self-respecting Old English house would be without one?
My favourite quote is from Mrs. Elwood, played by Bette Davis, to Jan. I think you did mention it quickly, but it is when she finds her after she's cut her finger on the glass and she says, what sort of person are you? And Jan replies, it's hard to say, just average, I guess. And Mrs. Elwood continues, are you adventurous and kind? Are you kind and sensitive? Do you sense things? It's just, okay. Creepy landlady alert. Get out of there.
Best hair or costume?
I think at the start of the film, Ellie wears a silver jacket
Yeah.
at one point. And it's great. I feel like that's the only 80s thing about this movie. It does look 80s. And it's just, sort of a shimmery, silky silver jacket.
Yeah, and what does it say on it? Is it NASA? Oh, it says Grand Prix on it. That's right.
Right.
My favourite outfit has to be Jan's riding outfit, which consists of a skin-tight denim trouser and the brightest red shirt you've ever seen with a matching red paisley bandana and a bolo tie.
Yeah.
So she owes full cowgirl for this English countryside riding.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's very Dukes of Hazzard. It's very sort of southern, sort of Texan, like cowboy.
Yeah.
Cowgirl.
If she'd slid across the bonnet of a car at some point, I wouldn't have been surprised. You're right.
Exactly.
Most 80s moment.
Yeah, I didn't find this movie 80s at all.
Wow.
If anything, I found it more 70s. It's like Jan's hair, very kind of feathery blonde, like almost like Farrah Fawcett type hair. Like it just didn't seem 80s.
Yeah. Well, I can counter you because aside from Ellie's silvery Grand Prix jacket, I thought the most 80s thing in this film was Ellie's chopper bicycle, which is iconic. It was made by Raleigh, a company in the UK in Nottingham. And this bicycle was based on dragsters or chopped motorcycles with its deep high-backed seat, its drop handlebars, the sissy bar on the back of the seat so a friend could stand behind you and hold on to the handlebar on the seat. Different sized wheels. The front wheel was smaller than the back one. And it had like a T-shaped gear stick that you used to shift gears.
Oh, wow.
And it single-handedly saved the company from going into administration. It was a massive hit.
Wow.
And I believe Ellie is sporting a Mark II chopper, which was produced between 1972 and 1983. And it was iconic for me as a kid.
Favorite scene?
The clear winner for me, and the thing that haunted me as a child, was the very first sighting of Karen in the mirror. It's a beautifully constructed scene. It's when Jan is putting up a mirror in the house. I don't know why they're moving in with a gigantic mirror. I mean, who does that when they're coming from abroad to rent a house? Anyway, she puts this mirror up, and I don't know how they did it, but her reflection is not in it. The camera sort of moves around her, and she is not in the mirror.
Yeah.
And then it suddenly cracks after she puts her fingers on it, and you get a shot from the other side of the glass, so you see her fingers tips touching the glass.
Surface,
And it cracks into a triangle, and Karen appears in it blindfolded in white, screaming for help. with this really weird sound design on her voice, so you can't really make out what she's saying. And then the whole thing suddenly shatters and tips over in front of her. And it scared the living crap out of me as a kid. I think it's a brilliant piece of uncanny, spooky, scary filmmaking.
Yeah.
And it's in broad daylight.
Yeah, but I found, all of the sort of Karen scenes. That name has not aged well at all. Like, as soon as they said Karen in this movie, I just thought, that's got a different meaning now. It's not quite as scary as it was back in 1980.
No, maybe she just wants to see the manager.
Yeah, exactly.
Most cliche moment.
There's many cliches in this movie, but I enjoyed them at the same time. There are just so many. Like the parents not being anywhere. Like you've got these kids just running through the woods, like talking to strangers, getting the strangers to go with them to a chapel to do a ritual. Like what? Where's the supervision here? The parents just nowhere.
Well, as a child of the 80s, that actually does ring quite true.
Well, okay.
It's surprising that we survived. We weren't supervised as much as children probably are now.
Yeah. But I mean, you just see this so often in movies with kids where they're just doing whatever they want. And the parents are like, oh, it's fine. They're fine.
Yeah.
Cliche for you?
For me, the biggest cliche is the weirdly relevant music box, which I think you have to have in a horror movie.
Yeah.
And in this one, it has a girl in a white dress spinning surrounded by mirrors, which is like a bit on the nose, but
yes,
okay.
Of course. I didn't even realize.
Best special effect.
Well, I've already said mine. Mine is the mirror. I don't know how they did that. It's a practical on-set effect, and you look in the mirror, and Jan is not in it. And I don't know how they did it.
Yeah.
It's great.
I love
It's
it as
very
well.
clever.
I did also enjoy I didn't enjoy, but I like the effect of the sort of the pond drowning scene with the bubbles kind of on glass, and she's kind of illuminated as well, so it really seems like, what is happening here? You've got these bubbles kind of hitting the glass, and it's a really odd looking scene.
Yeah, it's very peculiar in that way that only late 70s, early 80s spooky films could be.
Yeah.
Favorite sound effect.
My favourite moment of sound design is more of an editing choice, I think. It's where the mum is trying to drive the kids away from the house in the middle of a storm at night.
All right, yeah.
She does that. And there's churning music from Stanley Meyer going on the soundtrack. And then all of a sudden the car's electrics go out and the windscreen wipers stop. And the music stops as well, but not like on a note with a like reverb tail.
I noticed
it just
that.
cuts.
I noticed that. It almost felt like, was the radio playing the score?
Was she listening to a film score in the car? If so, kudos to her. I do that all the time.
Most funniest moment.
This is after the mirror smashes on the floor with Jan, and Ellie says, hey, that's 7 years bad luck. And Paul replies, nonsense, I broke a mirror the day I met your mother. And then the mother replies, I'm not sure that makes your point, darling.
Yeah, I love the energy the parents have. I love the relationship.
Banter.
It's great.
It's really great.
Yeah. Speaking of the real estate agent earlier, my favourite funny moment comes from her. I actually think Eleanor Summerfield, who plays Mrs. Taylor, the estate agent, I think she's the MVP of this movie.
Right.
It's a fantastic performance.
Yeah.
Every line reading that she has is a delight. It's like this particular type of Englishness that I don't think you really hear very much anymore.
Yeah.
But every vowel is great anyway. But my favourite is her withering response to Ellie. After they've left and Mrs. Aylward has consented to them renting the house, when they've been told that she's very picky, Mrs. Taylor says, I actually think it was your daughter that did the trick. And Ellie says, me? And she just looks at her and goes, no, dear.
Oh my God. Yeah, that is great. It is great. And that's our movies.
Hello, I'm Lance Guest, and you're listening to Movie Oubliette.
Hey, it's final verdict time. Should The Watcher in the Woods from 1980 be set free from its earthly bonds to travel back to the spirit realm or alien planet or wherever it's from and project itself on everyone's mirrors and be celebrated once again? Or should it be zapped with a Disney rotoscoped bolt of lightning and return into the depths of the oubliette, lost for eternity? Conrad, it's a childhood favorite of yours. What would you say for this movie?
Well, I still think it's really good gateway horror. I'm not sure it would work for modern kids, maybe, because, I mean, it's a bit creaky, as you say, it's quite old-fashioned.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure whether you could recommend it to a new generation. But I don't know. I think people who, in our generation, who might have missed it, might have not heard of it, because it's in the oubliette, it's been forgotten. I think it's well worth checking out just because it's so spooky and it's so effective and it has such an interesting backstory in terms of its production that I think it's a fascinating piece of filmmaking history in and of itself. But the interesting thing about it, though, is despite it being such a female-centered film, the problem I have is that Lynn Holly Johnson's central performance is just so bloody irritating. She's really getting in people's faces and in their lives and meddling and shrieking the entire time. So I did find it difficult to revisit as an adult, I will admit. So I am sort of on the fence about it and aware of its flaws and its limitations. But the nostalgia wins for me. I still love it. I still think it's spooky. I still think it's a brilliant piece of uncanny gateway horror filmmaking. So I think I would let it go. I would.
Okay, yeah. Well, for me, I was very surprised that this was a 1980s movie. Didn't feel like that at all. Felt very gothic horror, very 60s almost. I wasn't that fazed by Jan, the character of Jan. I didn't mind the shrieking. I don't know. I didn't think it was that irritating. I wish that the original ending was retained. Like the theatrical ending doesn't work. It's confusing. It makes it a bit like, what just happened? I don't know what just happened. I would have loved the terrifying, ghostly, like laser shooting alien. Like, yes, bring that one. I want that ending. That's great.
Okay.
Overall, I actually loved this movie. I thought this was everything I could ever want in a movie. And because it was Disney, I think it was more subtle with its sort of spookiness. It didn't just go out with like just throwing buckets of blood on everything. And the scares were like, they were subtle, but really unnerving. Like they really got under your skin with all the mirrors and the glass cracking and the clues. Like I love that. I love a murder mystery in a spooky, haunting movie, even though it's not a haunting. It's really an alien from another dimension. I love that. I love the genre mashup. That's great. Like this movie, for me, I think it's incredible. Yes, 100% would recommend this movie. I think it's a great time.
That's really cool. So I'm always worried about introducing of my childhood nostalgia films to see, how they play for somebody from a slightly different generation, but also somebody who's watching it as an adult rather than a kid being freaked out by it. So to hear that it works for you and that you enjoyed it, I think is really cool. I'm impressed by that. Let's see what our patrons thought of this. Hello, Hal.
Yes, Conrad.
What have you been up to?
I've been generating erotic werewolf novels for people to self-publish on Amazon.
Oh, nice. Okay, can we have the patron's verdict, please?
They agree with you guys. They want it to escape the oubliette.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
So they agree with us.
They did, but it's not unanimous. It's a mixed bunch
okay.
in terms of the responses. Yeah. Iconographer says, 30 years ago, my friends had a bootlegged copy of this movie and told me it was the scariest thing they'd ever seen. They begged me to watch it, but I never got around to it until now.
Wow.
And while this is hardly the scariest movie ever, it has a genuine creepy factor.
Yes.
The POV camera work is unnerving, and I think it's genuinely a good little mystery with some fun twists. Is it perfect? Surely not, but I enjoyed it. Eddie Coulter says, I say set it free. The Watcher in the Woods is a childhood favourite of mine. The film has a great creepy vibe thanks to director John Hough, who also directed The Legend of Hell House and Hammer's films Twins of Evil.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'd be keen to see more John Hough movies. So far, I really enjoyed them.
Yeah, I'd like to see Twins of Evil now. Maybe that could be our next minisode.
Yeah, I want to see The Incubus. That looks fascinating. I have no idea what it's about, but the cover looks, really intriguing.
I think Louis Saavedra's nominated that for us a few times, actually.
Right, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
A wicked person says, let her shriek her dialogue from the reverberant cyclopean depths of the oubliette. There are ways to smoothly combine horror with science fiction. This is not one of those ways.
Right. So he partly agrees with you, Conrad.
He does, yeah. The shrieking got him down. I was very keen to hear Jasmine's take on this. It's a female protagonist. What did Jasmine think?
Oh, yes.
And she says, I saw this as a teenage college student on the Disney Channel, and when they used to air their older films after midnight, I remember I had to fight from nodding off through its terrible teenage acting and sloppy editing, and figured there was no reason I would ever have to sit through it again. When I heard Conrad say it was a childhood favourite, I was motivated to rewatch it this week. Well, Conrad, shame. Shame on you. I'm so sorry, Jasmine.
Oh, wow.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's not for everyone, obviously.
It's clearly not. No. So there we go. And finally, Chazilla said something that I've been saying. The Watcher in the Woods was my horror gateway film. I was 10 when I saw it in theatres. Oh, I would have loved to have seen it in the theatre. And loved it. I didn't sleep for a week.
Yeah, I would have been the same.
Yeah, fun to watch it again as an adult. It has something to scare everyone. Bette Davis, hoary old trees, creepy dude in a raincoat, and lots of dark shadows. John Hough definitely directed it in the Hammer Legend of Hell House style. It really shows you what a good director can do, even with G-rated material.
Yeah, very true.
So a mixed bag, but overall, yes, our patrons did vote to set it free.
Yeah.
With a 2/3 majority.
Ah, great. All right.
Off you go then, Watcher.
Goodbye. All right. So, Conrad, what is the film up next?
Well, we're shifting gears in terms of decade and genre. We will be watching a 1994 American superhero film, The Shadow.
Ooh, I don't think I've seen this movie.
No, I haven't either, although this is yet another one where I know the score back to front because it's Jerry Goldsmith.
Ah, right. Okay.
So I have the CD of his score, but I've never seen it. So this is Alec Baldwin as the Shadow.
Right.
And John Lone, Penelope Ann Miller, Ian McKellen, Tim Curry. It's a great lineup.
Oh, okay. Director?
It's directed by Russell Mulcahy, who directed Highlander.
Razorback?
Yeah, Razorback too.
Ah.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because on the one hand you go, he directed Highlander, and then you say, and he directed Highlander 2. Oh.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's one of those instances where the same director directs a way worse sequel.
Yeah, Shut the Bed. So, I don't know. It could go either way. All I know is it was released 30 years ago exactly. Right. And it cost 40 million and its box office was 48. So it did not do well and nobody's spoken about it since. So, yeah.
Looking forward to that one. Okay, so listeners, if you want to keep up to date with our episodes, you can follow us on all our platforms as Movie Oubliette, and you can also email us at movie.oubliette@gmail.com.
And if you want to support the show, head on over to Patreon, where for as little as $1, you can nominate films for us to feature in future episodes and get access to extended portions of the show. And for $5, you can vote on the final verdict and get access to our monthly minisodes. This month, we were talking about sequels, specifically number 2s, and which ones are better than the originals or which ones are worse.
yes. And then some unpopular opinions as well.
Yeah, some hot takes in there, so get ready for that. And for $10, you could be an executive producer on Patreon with access to behind-the-scenes info like Chazilla, Eddie Coulter, Isaac Sutton, Dr. Doggy, Surge of Cold Crash Pictures, and Iconographer.
Thank you so much for all the support. We've got merchandise at Redbubble and a YouTube channel, which we should add some more content on soon sometime. But
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
We've got some great content on there already. And if you haven't already, give us a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're using to listen to us. It does help us out a lot.
It does, yeah.
Okay, so that's it for this episode. Conrad, is that right? Until next time, listeners, goodbye.
Avoid mirrors. Bye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie Oubliette.
When you said opera, I thought he was a serious musician.